So let's talk about table image. Paul, this is your segment. You chose table image. I love it. I love it. But tell me what we're going to be talking about.
Well, we're gonna like talk about what table image is, and like how my table image, I believe, got started in our podcast, and like how we react to other people's table images. So just basically a generalization of table image, focused on me because I'm so narcissistic.
Yes, well,
Uh,
naturally.
and I suppose as the game breaker or the person who is known to be enjoying other people's misery at the table,
Sure.
I have to be the most cognizant of my table image because it's so easy to be shifted into like jerk. I never want to play with Paul again. So and I think have a certain, I don't want to say insight, but I've thought a lot about table image, and I thought hey, let's have a conversation about that.
Done. So table image comes from poker, I think, is where table image is most often talked about. And playing a lot of poker myself, table image in poker is really, really important. What you project and knowing what you project and being able to shift what you project at any given point can really affect how other people respond to the exact same inputs, the exact same betting structure, the exact same moves that happen. In poker, there are four main play styles. There are four main table images, which is, there are actually two spectra, which create four things. And one is aggressive versus passive. And the other one is
Tight loose.
Tight loose. Tight loose, yes. Yeah. Aggressive, passive, tight loose. And listen, what I wanted to play against is if I could go to a poker table and sit down and say, I only want people with this table image, send me all you got. I want the passive loose. Passive loose players are what we call calling stations, and you can make bank on those people. That's wonderful because the loose means they'll bet on a lot of hands. They're not going to wait until they have great cards. They'll bet on a lot of hands. Passive means they're not going to raise you. They're not going to push all in. They're going to be they're going to be responding to what you give them without punching back. And that is a wonderful thing to be watching on a poker table. So now listen, that's not to say there aren't moments when passive loose play is proper play. When I have a particularly great hand and I'm dying for people to stay in, I'm trying to get as much money from this hand as possible, I want to affect passive loose play because I don't want to knock people out. I don't want to scare people away. I want to keep them on the hook until they hopefully get a better hand from the remaining cards that are left to be seen, so that they can think that they're doing well, only to be destroyed by me. I myself, I am a aggressive tight player. Which means I don't play a ton of hands. By the way, in a poker tournament that lasts 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, I'm not one thing. What I do is I choose a time increment, I don't make it every hour or every half hour because people can notice that. But I do, every 75 minutes, I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to knowingly switch gears. And I'm going to go, so all of a sudden for the next half an hour, I'm going to play a lot more hands. I'm going to loosen up the hands that I play, and I'm going to be playing a lot more. Maybe even sometimes calling more than raising, and or check raising and all that sort of stuff to change that. But my dominant strategy is aggressive tight, which means I wait for the cards to come to me, and when I get them, I am going to push hard. If a person bets, I am more likely to re-raise them than I am to call them, and that is simply about pressing the advantage when you have it, and that's the way I play. But each player at a poker table has a different table image, and there is a difference between the table image you think you're projecting and the one that you're projecting sometimes, which is another complication. So how do we bring that over to board games? I turn it over to Paul.
Well, I terminology from poker. The way that I connect everything is basically like people do not play against you. They play against the narrative that they have of you. And all the movements on the board just reinforce that narrative. Tom thinks he's playing a a tight aggressive hand or a tight aggressive table image. If I think Tom as a loose, a passive loose person, despite the fact that he's actually one thing, I'm going to react to my impression of what he's doing, and every movement, every bet that he makes is going to be seen through that lens. So
you're going to be cherry picking the evidence that supports your theory and your viewpoint.
Exactly. So the thing about table image is that it's not just play style. It's not just your personality. It's all these combination of things that create this narrative of you. And for me, in my dealing with table image, I've had to curate that. And the real wrinkle is, if you're conscious about it or you're unconscious about it, you're always projecting a table image.
Yes. So no matter what.
No matter what, like people are going to be thinking about you, whether they're your friends or strangers, and you can either choose to put out something deliberately or by your own presets, your own defaults, which is, I think is a very interesting thing. Like, because this will affect your win or lose rate, and this will also affect like things like social ramifications. For example, if you're a person who doesn't really care about winning, or you do, but you really want to spend a lot of time thinking, that's going to affect your table image. People may not want to play games with you if you are too AP. Like people may not want to spend a lot of time playing with you online if you are not great with technology. Like if your mouse, like I have an iPad, that I play online with, and sometimes that my touchscreen doesn't work the same way that a double click mouse will. Right. And then I have to assume that there are people who go like, oh, I like to play this, but Paul's going to be playing on that iPad. Is that something that I want to deal with? Like, I don't know if they're even doing that on a conscious level, but people are going to be processing the narrative that you put out.
Right.
So, this is why I think table image is something important, especially in this day and age where, things like living in the digital, playing in the digital space, it's not quite the same as sitting across from someone. And so there are other things that are going to really piss people off in a way. Like, for example, moments of silence, spending a long time thinking online, is very different than like, me watching someone sweat over like a move. Yeah. It's going to be much more interesting for me to see him or her sweat as opposed to me just dealing with silence for a while. And all that matters, So like, which comes down to like how I've got my table image. And I use this story as a way of saying like, look at your life. And if you care about this, like how has your table image been formed? So like, going down memory lane. Like I use three kind of like three kind of turn like key points in my journey that establishes table image. Basically, my table image is one of like, I am the game breaker. I'm a person who is known to try to break a game and trying to cause people pain with my gameplay. Mm-hmm. And it starts on the very first eve that Tom invited me to a game night, and we're playing a game called Wildlife, a game that we've never played again after. We've never played again after.
Well, it is a Wolfgang Kramer design, and it is a great game, but it caused feelings.
So basically, I'm the new guy. Tom has a group of people, and you're playing an animal in the kingdom. I was the crocodile. So and to the right of me was someone I can't remember what they were playing. Reptiles, maybe, or primates. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But anyway, not knowing the game, I understood various mechanisms, and one mechanism was like I can attack this person, and this person I don't know how his name was Chuck. Hey Chuck, I don't know if this person knew the game very well, but obviously he knew how to attack, and so he encroached in my space. And I was going, don't do that, like and I encroached back, and it sounds like that would be fine, but like either I kept on either it was asymmetrical or whatever, but like it just built on each other to the point where the game became one of not people trying to win. The game became just me and Chuck killing each other and everyone just watching.
Well, we weren't watching. We were continuing to play the game optimally, and we were lapping you guys on the board because both of you were just like, I no longer care what happens in this game so long as that guy loses.
And so the term that people used for me was the croc, and basically the table image that I acquired at that from that game was basically if you hurt Paul in the game, he will strike back at you, and he will sink your game. Now,
yeah, and to be clear, it's even more than that. It's if Paul feels hurt or betrayed by you, he will sabotage his own game and any chance of winning just in order to make sure that you don't succeed.
And so, what I found in successive games was that people were really giving me a lot of space because of that. I was like, oh, they think that from that one game, they have some insight into how I play all my games.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, you know what I should do? I should lean into that because that gives me an advantage. They're not dealing with me. I was only there for one game in their game. They don't know who I am yet. They only know, they're reacting to this one aspect that they think they know of me. And so from that, I started, like, I wouldn't say threatening is not the right word, but like I would present as if, the croc was such a integral part of my psyche that people would give me more space than I feel like they should.
Right. Well, let's say that even recently there are examples of you doing this. I don't know if it's entirely calculated. I know that was such an extreme example that certain people's play was overcorrecting the other way, and that gave you daylight, right?
Oh yeah, no, because like for all of it, I'm one of the newer people to this type of board gaming in our group. In our group, so I just had a lot of space in a way that because it was very interesting. I noticed that, and so like time goes on, and then we come to our second chapter, which is this game called Die Macher.
Demacher is pronounced. Demacher. It's a obscure little German game. We probably haven't mentioned it on the podcast. But if we have it, you would know that it's a game about the German parliamentary election system and the greatest game of all time.
Yeah, alleged greatest game of all time in Tom's mind. Anyway,
greatest game of all time.
So we're playing this game, and Tom spends a lot of time prepping for his game. Like as we were talking earlier about curating an experience, this is the experience that Tom was curating. Like he's like, I got all these people. I'm changing them from German to the current American system. It's gonna be so good. You could basically walking into the room, hear Tom salivate at playing the game because when mammals expect a certain stimuli, they salivate. And so the Tom mammalian response was like, it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so good. Anyway, so we're playing the game, and somewhere mid game, Tom and I make an arrangement where I go, hey, if you do this, I'll do this. And Tom goes, great. And then as the round continues, Tom does something that I perceive is against the spirit of our arrangement. And Tom would claim that to the letter of the law, I am not breaking our arrangement. And
Because just to be clear, for the listeners out there, because I wasn't in any way, shape, or form.
Sure. Like he said, she said, or Paul said, crybaby says.
I would say there's no negotiating with terrorists. So
fair enough. And so I go, Tom, I would rather you not do this because now I'm incentivized to do this thing that is against literally our arrangement because you are vulnerable to that. I'm saying don't do this. And Tom, if you ever get to play with Tom, when he says, you know what, I'm going to do this. And you do what you gotta do. Whenever he says that, that means he's going like, I'm gonna lose my cookies if you do this. But and so I he does this like in front of the whole table, and I go, well, I'm gonna do this now, and I do it, and Tom is quiet. And if you talk about Asian blush response for alcohol, I assume there's an Irish blush response for anger.
Definitely.
because he is so red and quiet. His game is destroyed at this point. Like he's not recovering. And what also happens is the person after me who Scott. Scott goes like, oh, well, if we're going to beat up on Tom,
piles on.
I'll pile on. And Tom has spent hours setting up this game. He is dead mid-game. and the image of that is set for me. It's like, oh, Paul's a betrayer. He's a crock and betrayer. So I get even more latitude when people are dealing with me. So I go
sort of though, but the truth is that you've noticed that you have a harder time making deals with people because of this, and especially deals that have a future component, because almost nobody in our group trusts you to keep a future portion of any deal.
I would say that everyone has to consider that. Everyone considers. I don't know if I find that there are people who have less likely to deal with me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Has it come at my detriment?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and let's do the other side of it. The other side of it is, for me, in that game, one of the interesting things is that we had a deal. I did not break the deal. You broke the deal, and that's legitimately the truth, right? You could say no. It flat out is the truth. You were saying I want to modify this deal because I see this other thing that is happening here, and that's kind of hurtful to me, and it kind of makes me want to break the deal. That's essentially what you were saying.
I absolutely own the fact that there was a contract, and letter of the law, I broke the contract. No doubt.
Yeah. But here's the thing. The interesting thing is,
I'm an awful person. Let's be clear. I'm not trying to say, oh, Paul's this. No, I'm an awful person. I'm just saying that here is my journey, and once I did this thing, I come to realize that, like, now I have this reputation, and so no one feels safe around me necessarily in the same way that people, like, for example, aside from a very few, very, very few instances, Tom is a person who will play and keep his word.
I will virtually always do that, and because of my table image. Because my table image is, there was a running joke for years and years and years in our game group, which is, okay, if you want to win, the first thing you do is make sure Tom doesn't win, and then you try to win, right? And because of that, there is this huge sort of group thing where everybody is just, make sure, if you make a deal with Tom, make sure you're getting a much better deal, right? And all that sort of stuff. So for me, if I add on top of that image that I already have of being a person that you can't let get away with anything, if I make a deal with somebody and betray them, it's over. It's over. So I never betray. And by the way, I kind of
never is incorrect. Never is correct.
Name it.
But rarely. It's a rare thing. It's a rare instance.
Name one instance when I actually betrayed somebody.
Well, you and I were allies in Eclipse, and I put myself in a very vulnerable position, and you proceeded to destroy my what you call it, my whole empire when this is the famous game where the term where the phrase this is not how it was coined. So please, Tom,
All right.
please let us get you off your high horse.
Fair enough.
I'm giving this to you. I'm saying you are general this way, and you are.
Sure.
But we are all awful people.
Yes.
And we all have a table image to uphold, or that we do,
or to cultivate. Yes,
that's a better word. And so the last game that I'll mention is a game of Avalon, where both Tom and I were the bad guys. This is before we were playing with Percival, and Trey was Merlin. And what happened in this game was that. Let me rewind a bit. Trey is the person I most fear at the table in almost every game. But Trey was not always this way with Avalon. Trey was awful. He was awful at Avalon in the beginning. And so here, Tom and I are the bad guys. Trey's Merlin. And it's the last vote. Two missions have failed. And it's looking like, the third mission was going to fail. And Trey stands up, or near stands up, proverbially stands up and goes, okay, we're going to lose. But I am Merlin, and both Tom and Paul are the bad guys. I know we're going to lose, but I can't allow this to happen. If so I'm Merlin. Please don't pick Paul and Tom in the group. And I think it was Mike or someone else. They picked the group, and you and I were able to convince the whole table that Trey was the bad guy.
Yep.
And so the team was chosen, and rather than just one person, like Tom and I, Tom or I, it was Tom and I on a team chosen by a good guy. And Trey, I wouldn't say losing his cookies, but he was really going he wasn't mad. He was just going I am so bad at this. I'm so bad at this. And it was hilarious. But, but then in that game there, I feel like my table image was solidified with Paul Sneaky. So I have going for me, I'm vindictive, I'm a person who betrays, and I'm sneaky.
Yeah, but let's only talk. Let's keep this to just how we are in games, not in life.
Exactly. And so, despite the fact that I am those three things, I believe that with that table image,
and and let me just say one thing before you. I know what you're gonna say, but the caveat is in Avalon, everybody's sneaky. So you are sneaky, but I'm not sure Avalon's the best example of that because everybody kind of gets a pass in Avalon.
Yes, but at the same time, there in that particular game, it was so egregious.
Yes, it was.
It was so egregious. This was not your normal oh my god, this is one of those things where what just happened? It was at least the way I remember it.
Yes.
And this is just my narrative for myself. Trey could go oh yeah, I mean I let him have that. I don't know what the narrative is, but my narrative is this. And so with that, with those three elements, I've kind of cultivated this idea where playing with me, you can't trust me.
Right.
You can't just blindly trust me. And what that affords me in my table image is that people are going to, I don't want to use the word fear, but they are going to overestimate the things that I'm considering. Because anything is possible. In a poker game, I play what would be called a loose aggressive. So there's a wide range of things that are possible from my actions, despite the fact whether I'm considering them or not. So in a way, I believe that what I'm trying to project is a player that is better than I actually am. So that's and the way you do that is continue to lean into these things. Like in Avalon, for example, not that we talk too much about this game, I cultivate for the long term game an image of like, we don't know about this guy, the kind of the anti-hero type perspective. Is he going to come on the good side or the bad side? Even if I'm good, where most people in our game group will try to cultivate a sense of like, I'm always good, whether they're bad, good or bad.
Right.
So this is, once again, I'm like, I've crafted this table image for not just any one game, but for all the games that we play. And more importantly, I think people do that all the time. I just don't think they're entirely in control of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. I mean, you've noticed that for me, when you're viewed as the guy that you gotta stop from the get-go or that sort of thing, it's lessened over time, which I've tried to do. I've tried to lessen it over time.
Well, to be honest, like, I feel like the great thing about table images, like, it's not just dependent on the person. Like, I've spent a long time undermining you, Tom.
Oh no! Yeah. By the way, you and Trey and Matt and like the people that know what they're doing are constantly trying to like the way I play each game is to point out to each player the best move for them when it happens to also benefit me. Right?
Absolutely.
And you pointed that out a million times. You're like, yeah, listen, and this is a classic Paul line. Listen, Mike, what Tom is saying is true. But he is also saying that because it benefits him. And if we keep benefiting him like this, just because he's telling the truth, doesn't mean it's really helping us. But which is what you're reduced to with my table image as being listen, I'm competitive, I'm going to play the best game I can, but I'm also going to try and help you play the best game you can play. That's sort of the table image I'm presenting, and it creates a situation for you where you have to kind of advocate to people not to do the best thing for them.
Oh no! And this is how I see it. Once again, table images varied, right? Like what you think you're projecting is not necessarily. So like what I've consciously done when I came into the game space with this game group, I was like, Tom's winning a lot, and you know what? I feel like people are really helping him win. And then I'm analyzing the game a bit more. I go like, oh, Tom has a certain style that he plays. He plays to be second, and then at the very last bit, he'll go, "Oh, this person's winning. You better beat them." And so the group tends to beat the person in front, and then Tom wins. Oh my God, I don't know how I won. It was just, really, I could just see blah 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 and whatever. I'm like, this is bull crap. And so I systematically, consciously go like, oh, hey, person. Tom is not a person who's going to help you out. Tom is going to help himself out. And the way he's going to do this is he's going to point out something that's good for you, but it's going to help him a little bit too. And if he does this enough times with enough people, he's going to have effectively more moves than everyone else. And in those more moves, he's going to win. So don't do that. Take the less good option for yourself and go with that doesn't help Tom. And we'll find that like there'll be a more even play. So what I basically did was I said Tom is sneaky. I put that into the meta of our group.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like I was successful.
I mean, somewhat, yeah. I think somewhat, but
yeah.
it does come down, and it's a constant tug of war. Sometimes your narrative of my play, which is interesting because I don't try and change people's perception of your table image, but lots of people.
But I'm the villain. I'm the villain.
Well, no, but lots of people are trying. Here's the thing: there are active campaigns that are trying to frame my table image. I don't think there are that many active campaigns trying to frame anybody else's table image, just mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say for you, the way that I would claim it to people in our group who are listening, Tom is the person who won't own his sneakiness. He'll say he does, but he doesn't. He's a bad person. And here's where it becomes. At least I own it.
Oh, that's delightful. That is
but,
absolutely delightful. Nonsense, but delightful.
but like, and let me conclude with like examples. Like it's not just. I'm not just talking about how I project my stuff, and like I respond to other people's table image. Like I'll give you 3 examples of people in our group that that I can see my game change because they're at the table.
Sure.
For example, Jake. Jake comes in and his table image is one of like, hey, I'm just here to have fun.
Yeah.
That's it. Regardless, he might be secretly competitive. He might be like, I'm going to kill them if they don't let me. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his head, but he has the tone of like, I'm just here to have fun. And just by putting that out there, like I find myself less competitive. I find myself less likely to go like, oh, I'm going to go for the win. I'm less sneaky. I'm more pushing towards group fun when Jake's at the table.
100%. I'm the same way. If you define sneaky this way, then I guess I am sneaky. But I will always point out the best move that you can make if it also helps me a little bit, even just a little bit. I will always point that out to you.
That's right. It's that fine print at the end. It goes, I will always point out the best move for you if it helps me.
Yeah, if it helps me a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And by the way, seven times out of 10, I say that too. 7 times out of 10, I said, look, it helps me. I'm pointing it out because it helps me too, but it's a much better move for you, right? And it is. It's your turn, so it should be a better move for you. But in any case, I don't do that with Jake. With Jake, I will point out the best move for Jake, regardless of whether or not it helps me.
Same with me. This isn't a matter of him being the casual gamer and not playing as many games. For me, I go like, oh, he's really in this for the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I really want to give him that. I don't. So anyway,
100%.
So another person, and this is my own personal kryptonite, would be Alfred.
Yeah,
and I spent a lot of restless nights just going like, how does Alfred do this? I don't understand. Like, because he's able to do things that no one else in our group is able to do to me. No one else. And it's not like he's sneaky. It's not like he's,
a little bit.
I don't think he's planning these things, but he's able to Jedi mind trick me in a way that makes me go like, well, spend weeks thinking about this. And what I've come down to is like his table image is he projects this feeling of, or like the thought process, like I'm not winning. Like he is always projecting this sense that, to me at least, the way I read it, whether it's conscious or unconscious, like he's not winning. He thinks he's not winning. And because of that, I wind up like just missing him. I wind up not putting him into my calculations the way I normally would with any other person. Even Jake, even Jake doesn't have this "I'm not winning" aspect. With Jake, there's a sense of like, hey, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do, and I can focus that. But Alfred, I guess what I say, he's so modest. He's so modest to the point of invisible, and I hate him for it.
I don't know if modest is the right word, but he is definitely he plays great. He plays very well, very quietly, and that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to be doing well in a game and to do it quietly, and he is very good at that. That's for sure.
And so, yeah, exactly. And so I don't know how. So to my disadvantage, and this is probably at a subconscious level, like I'm just not evaluating his position correctly. And it's amazing. Like, I'm really impressed with his ability to do this. Like, I go like, I don't know if he's controlling it, but like his table image forces me or draws out of me this, I think you humans call it compassion.
Compassion.
Okay,
It's this weird. I've tried to explain it to you many times, but it's okay. We'll get there.
And my algorithm isn't very good at handling that. Anyway,
no.
So he affects my gameplay with his table image. And the last person I'll use is Trey. Because for me, Trey in our group is the studier. Like, I feel that I am I'm a pretty good game player. I think you're a pretty good game player. I feel like what we have in common is like with our natural gifts or whatever, our defaults, like we get games pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so like, oh, here's the rhythm of the game. Here's the rhythm of the game. And then we just crank up and we streamline that understanding. I don't know if Trey has always this way, but like I know what he will do is like he will, despite his initial prejudices or where he starts, he will grind away at what is the best way to play, the most optimal, like dispassionate way to play. And you can see this in how he got so good at Agricola. You can see is how he got good at Avalon, because he was the worst at Avalon, and now he is like one of the best.
Yeah.
And you just see his thought process, like in any game, like, you know, if we play it more, you know, if we get into a streak of games where we just play the same game over and over again, he's the person I'm worried about, because I know Tom will peter out. I know I will peter out, but Trey will continue to get good. This, regardless of whether it's true or not, that's his table image of him. That's my table image of him. And so what that winds up being for me is like when I play against him, I find myself more conservative. Like, you know, because I go like, oh, he's going to see that that this position is, I'm vulnerable in this position. And for all of it, like, you know, he's going to make that consideration. Whereas if I'm playing Dimitri, I know that he's going to be focusing on his own thing. He won't care about my position. You know, Trey is going to have that consideration. And the thing is, it's not that you don't, Tom. It's not that Matt doesn't. It's not that Ben doesn't,
right,
or Jesse or anyone else. It's that because I know Trey is really active in his, no, it's not even the right word. Because my table image of Trey is one where I have this narrative of him. I put so much weight on that like I wind up playing more conservative, because I don't want to be put in a vulnerable position. Because to me, he's the person who's going to leverage it the most.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Trey and I, the difference in the optimal play styles for us is that Trey plays setting himself up for really big turns where he gets this maximum benefit of the game system. And I try to put myself in positions where no matter what anybody else is doing, I'm benefiting, you know, passively from the things that they're doing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, you're a person who's trying to get passive points, basically, and Trey is going for the big payout.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm probably somewhere in between. Like, you know, I'm really actually I'm more like Matt in that, you know, here are pieces of junk, and like, let's put something together. And I'm a person who will, when I'm playing you two, I will attack tempo so that you don't have enough time to accumulate a lot of passive income, and Trey won't have time to create that big payout. You know, it doesn't always work. That's just what I choose how to attack you guys generally. But, you know, it's regardless of that fact, like, you know, Trey is the person who I go like, I want to play loose and aggressive, but he's forcing me, because he's at the table, to play tighter, which is very interesting. I find it very interesting. Like, you know, it's a thing where we're, you know, the takeaway, of course, is like basically, you know, we're all affected by table image. We're all, you know, whether we're conscious of it or not, we are affected by it. We're always projecting it as well, whether we're conscious of it or not. And I think the last thing about table image that is interesting to me is that it's a living thing.
Yes, it is constantly shifting and evolving. Yeah,
like you know, I as the villain of the group, you know, or whatever you want to call it, as the person who was the croc and the betrayer and the sneaky, you know, for all of it, I don't think people really see me that way in the same way that they saw me earlier in the in the game, my game experience with this group. I think in the end,
which brings up the point that you can't really tell what your own table image is. Like, Paul, you think that you've evolved, which is amazing.
which has been this concerted effort that Tom has been trying to like trick me into thinking I've evolved. That way.
So here's the thing, so everybody, if you're taking anything from this, it's try to get a sense of what your table image is, see if it's working for you, and see if you can adjust it, because you can make certain adjustments. But just realize that it's going to be the sort of thing where the metagame starts to take over a little bit at your game nights. At our game nights, it is constantly filled with, oh man, look how well Trey is doing. Is he going to lap us? So what are you talking about? I'm losing. And just the back and forth of the, wow, you know what? That was and Paul will just sneak in with that was really sneaky, Tom. That was really sneaky. I'm like, what? There was nothing sneaky. You're just throwing out words.
well, what's interesting is basically, with diplomacy, the adage is what?
Once you play diplomacy, everything is diplomacy.
And same with table image, right? Once you start playing the game of table image, every game is
about table image. Yeah. It's about perception. Now, the more multiplayer solo games you play, right, the less this becomes a thing.
Yes.
But can't you tell this is fun? Can't you tell there's something in this, in the in trying to get people to assess threats toward your vision versus toward somebody else's vision? There's I don't know. Listen, maybe we're horrible people. Definitely one of us is a horrible person.
That's right.
The other one,
and the other one owns it.
Anyway, Paul, this is a great topic. Thank you so much for bringing it up. I think it's really awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.